Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, so you wanted to explore MLK's views on affirmative action.
Yeah.
Specifically, what his book, Where Do We Go From Here, tells us about his vision for economic justice.
Okay.
Well, let me tell you, this is a fascinating and often overlooked part of his legacy.
Really is.
It's kind of amazing how by 1967, even after those huge victories with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act,
Right.
King was already like,
Yeah.
okay, we've made progress, but these legal changes haven't gone far enough.
Yeah, he was already looking ahead to the next challenge.
Yeah, boy.
Dismantling those deeply ingrained economic inequalities.
Oh, so he recognized that even with those legal wins,
Yeah.
there was still this huge gap
Exactly.
for African Americans and other marginalized communities.
Exactly, and he wanted to.
Wow.
He recognized that we had to move beyond just
Like theoretical equality.
beyond theoretical equality to something much more
Tangible.
and impactful.
And so that's where his call for affirmative action comes
Yeah.
in. And I think people misunderstand what he meant by affirmative action.
I think so too, because
He wasn't just talking about fairness.
no, he
He wanted to see real economic empowerment.
real economic empowerment. Absolutely.
And he had that famous quote where he said,
Oh, which one?
"A society that has done something against the Negro for hundreds of years must now do something special for him in order to equip him to compete on a just and equal basis."
That's a powerful one.
It really is.
And it cuts to the heart of the issue
It does.
because he's confronting the historical context.
Hundreds of years of oppression
Exactly.
that led to this huge economic gap.
Yeah, and he's arguing that.
Like just saying, okay, now everyone has equal rights on paper
Right.
doesn't actually address that gap.
It doesn't at all. And so he's saying
It demands proactive measures
it does.
to level the playing field.
Exactly.
So it's more about like corrective measures
It is.
to account for those systemic disadvantages,
Yes.
not just handouts or special treatment like some critics would argue.
Right. And he really saw it as a way to compensate for the systemic disadvantages woven into American society.
Like woven into the fabric.
Yeah.
It wasn't just an accident.
Not at all.
But it's amazing how forward-thinking he was,
It really is.
tackling these massive issues decades ago.
Decades ago.
But to really understand his vision, we need to consider the historical context.
Absolutely.
Like what was actually happening in the 1960s.
Right.
So, I mean, we have to remember,
Yeah.
President Kennedy had already signed Executive Order 2925,
Oh, yeah. Back in 1961.
which was an early form of affirmative action.
It was focused on government contractors.
Oh, so even before King's book came out,
Yes,
there was already some movement on this.
there was.
But King saw those early efforts as just a starting point.
Yeah, he thought it was a good start, but not nearly enough.
Like, we need to go further.
Much further.
So he was pushing for real systemic change.
He was.
And what's even more interesting is
Okay.
his vision for economic justice wasn't limited to race.
That's true.
He called for a war on poverty
He did.
to unite disadvantaged groups.
All sorts of disadvantaged groups.
Yeah, he saw this common struggle
Mm.
faced by Hispanics, Native Americans, even economically disadvantaged whites.
And that's a point that's often overlooked.
Yeah, because people often think of him as only focused on racial justice.
Right. But really, he was focused on economic justice for anyone.
Anyone who's being left behind.
Yeah. And it almost makes you think
Well, the
about how his ideas could be applied to.
economic divides we see today.
You're right.
It's like he understood that poverty and injustice weren't confined to one race or group.
Not at all. His vision was incredibly inclusive.
Wow.
And it speaks to how social and economic issues,
They're all connected.
they're all connected.
And he didn't just talk about it.
No, he did.
He put his beliefs into action.
He did with the Poor People's Campaign in 1968.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So that was a powerful example.
Of his commitment.
His commitment to actually doing something.
Turning words into action. He organized that massive march on Washington
He did.
to demand things like
Yeah.
fair wages,
Yeah.
better housing, access to quality education.
And those were concrete demands.
Not just vague ideas.
Right.
They were aimed at creating a more just and equitable society.
Exactly.
But this shift in focus
Yeah.
from civil rights to economic justice,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't met with universal applause.
It was.
There was actually pushback,
There was.
even within the African-American community itself.
That's right.
Like, not everyone agreed with King's approach.
Well, there were different schools of thought emerging at the time.
So some people felt that
Yeah.
this emphasis on economic issues might actually dilute the core message of the civil rights movement,
Right.
which had been so focused on ending segregation.
Yeah, and achieving legal equality.
Right.
So they were concerned about that.
And others like Malcolm X.
Yes, and those in the Black Power movement,
They believed in economic empowerment,
they did.
but felt it should be achieved independently.
Yeah, separate from white-dominated systems.
Wow, so it was a complex time
It really was.
with many competing visions
Yeah,
for the future.
for the future.
And then you also had the growing white backlash
of course.
to contend with.
Yeah.
Many argued that affirmative action
Yeah.
amounted to reverse discrimination,
Right.
and they were worried that it would undermine the principle of meritocracy.
Like the idea that success should be based solely on individual merit and hard work.
Wow, so it was a really charged debate
It was.
that highlighted all those deep divisions
Absolutely.
and anxieties surrounding race and opportunity in America.
And those anxieties and divisions,
They haven't gone away.
no, they haven't.
It feels like we're still grappling with those same tensions today,
We are.
even if the language has evolved a little bit.
Yeah.
And the debate reached all the way to the Supreme Court in 1978.
With the landmark case.
Regents of the University of California v. Bakke,
Yes, that one really questioned the legality of affirmative action.
especially in higher education.
Right.
Wow.
And that shows how King's vision tapped into this fundamental debate.
About fairness, opportunity, and the role of race in American society.
And it's a debate that continues.
Still today.
Yes.
So King really sparked a national conversation
He did.
that we're still having in so many ways.
In so many ways.
And I think to fully grasp his stance and its impact,
Oh, yeah.
we need to examine the different perspectives on affirmative action
We do.
that were taking shape during his lifetime
Because those diverse viewpoints provide valuable context.
for understanding the complexity of this issue.
Yes, both then and now.
Okay, so let's unpack those different perspectives because this is where things get really interesting.
Let's do it. So you probably heard a lot about critical race theory.
CRT.
Yeah, CRT.
It's a hot topic these days.
It is, and it's often misunderstood.
Yeah, for sure.
But it offers really valuable insights into affirmative action.
Okay, so how does CRT view affirmative action?
Well, for CRT scholars, affirmative action is like a crucial tool
Okay.
to address this deep-rooted racial injustice that they see as embedded in American institutions.
So they're saying it's not enough
No.
to just outlaw racism.
No, they argue that centuries of discrimination
Right.
have created this system where it's,
baked into the system.
yeah, where simply outlawing racism isn't enough.
Like we need more than that.
Much more. And they say we need concrete actions
Like what?
to counterbalance this historical disadvantage.
And that's where affirmative action comes in.
That's exactly where it comes in.
Interesting.
So they're not just talking about individual acts of racism.
Mhm.
They're talking about the systems and structures that perpetuate inequality.
So it's more about
It is.
dismantling the systems that have historically benefited certain groups at the expense of others.
And they argue that affirmative action
Okay.
is one way to try to level the playing field.
It makes me think of Derek Bell,
Oh, yeah.
who was one of the leading voices in CRT.
He was a powerful voice.
He believed that affirmative action was absolutely necessary
It was.
to give marginalized groups
Yeah.
the access and opportunities that they've been denied for so long.
Exactly. And Bell's work directly connects back to
King.
King's call for something special to be done.
Right.
It's about acknowledging that true equality
Hmm.
requires more than just removing legal barriers.
You have to proactively address those lingering effects
We do.
of discrimination.
Absolutely.
It's like trying to fix a broken foundation.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
You can't just slap on a new coat of paint
Oh.
and expect everything to be fine.
You have to address the underlying problem.
Yeah, and that's what they're saying affirmative action is trying to do.
It is trying to level that playing field.
Okay, so we've talked about the liberal reformist view,
Uh-huh.
which sees affirmative action as like
Yeah,
a natural extension to the civil rights movement.
right.
And the Marxist perspective, which questions
Mm-hmm.
how effective it can really be
Within a capitalist system.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we've got CRT,
Mm-hmm.
which sees affirmative action as this vital tool
Right.
to combat systemic racism.
Yes. But there's another perspective we need to consider.
Okay, which is...
The neoconservative view.
Okay, so what do neoconservatives say about affirmative action?
Well, they tend to present a counter-argument.
Okay.
Thinkers like Shelby Steele
Okay.
argue that affirmative action,
Yeah.
while well-intentioned,
Mm-hmm.
can actually create more problems.
Really?
Yeah, they say it can create dependency and resentment
Instead of
true empowerment.
wow. So they're saying it might backfire.
In a way, yeah.
So they're concerned that it might lead to
Yeah,
people relying on government assistance
right.
instead of taking initiative themselves.
Yeah, and they really believe that the focus should be on,
Individual rights,
and equal opportunities.
not group-based entitlement.
Exactly. They see affirmative action as potentially undermining those core values of hard work
Hard work
and merit
that are essential
that are essential
for success.
in a free society.
And they're also worried
Yeah.
about the possibility of reverse discrimination,
Right.
where qualified individuals from majority groups might be overlooked
Yeah, in favor of minority candidates.
because of affirmative action policies.
Exactly.
Sure.
It's a complex argument
It is.
that raises really important questions
It does.
about unintended consequences.
Yeah, because when you try to fix one problem,
Yeah,
sometimes you create another.
sometimes you do.
It seems like
It does.
no matter what side of this debate you're on, there are valid points to consider.
There are. It's not a simple issue
Not at all.
with easy answers.
And I think what's interesting
Yeah.
is that all these different perspectives,
Yeah.
while often presented as opposing viewpoints,
Right.
actually have a lot of overlap.
They do.
It's not like
It's not black and white.
one is right and one is wrong.
Exactly. They all reflect this inherent complexity.
Of trying to address these historical injustices
Yeah.
and create a more equitable society.
Right. Because how do you
do that?
how do you actually
Address
Yeah.
these wrongs of the past
Right.
and create a more level playing field
Yeah.
without potentially creating new problems.
Right.
It's tough.
It is.
But even with all these different viewpoints,
Yeah.
we can see that King's call for affirmative action
Yeah.
has had this lasting impact
A huge impact.
on how we think about equality and opportunity.
It has.
Like his vision really helped pave the way for policies
It did.
that aim to level the playing field,
Yeah.
like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission
The EEOC,
Yep.
which was established.
under the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
That's right. And it's responsible for enforcing laws against.
Workplace discrimination.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a direct result of the movement that King helped spark.
So even though we're still debating affirmative action today, it's a testament to how forward-thinking King was. He was grappling with these issues decades ago.
Decades ago.
He forced us to confront these uncomfortable realities
He did.
of race and inequality.
In America.
And he didn't offer easy answers,
No, he didn't.
but he challenged us
He challenged us
to think critically
to think critically about
about how we achieve true equality.
and justice.
And it's amazing how relevant his call for affirmative action remains today
It really is.
when we see the ongoing struggles
Yeah.
to address historical injustices.
In areas like,
Education, housing, healthcare.
it's still so relevant.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
King's vision for economic justice,
Uh-huh.
his call for affirmative action, the
Yeah.
historical context,
Yeah.
and these various perspectives on this really complex issue.
It is complex.
But what does it all mean for us today?
That's the question, isn't it?
Now, why should we care
Why should we care?
about these debates from decades ago?
Well, I think understanding King's legacy, it pushes us to think critically about how we actually achieve true equality.
Yeah.
And it's not enough to just dismantle legal barriers.
Like we were talking about earlier.
We have to address those deep-seated economic disparities.
That continue to affect people's lives.
They do. They continue to plague our society.
It's a call to action.
It is
To examine our own beliefs and biases.
to understand the historical context of inequality.
And to actually work towards creating a more just and equitable society.
Because it's not enough to just talk about it.
We have to do something.
You have to do something.
Yeah, it feels like we're at this point where folks are just talking past each other,
Yeah.
not really engaging with the deeper complexities.
You're right. It's like they're just
Yeah,
throwing arguments back and forth.
instead of actually listening and trying to understand.
Exactly. And that's where I think
Yeah.
King's legacy can be so instructive.
How so?
Well, he wasn't afraid of tough conversations.
Right, he was willing to.
Yeah, he knew that real progress.
It requires us to confront those uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, you got to face them head on.
And challenge the status quo.
Challenge the status quo. Absolutely.
So how do we channel that spirit
Mm-hmm.
of open dialogue and critical thinking?
That's the big question, right?
It is.
I think maybe it starts with recognizing
Okay.
that this isn't just about affirmative action.
It's bigger than that.
It's bigger. It's about how we create a more just and equitable world.
For everyone.
For everyone. And that means looking beyond our own individual experiences.
Right.
And understanding those systemic factors.
That perpetuate inequality.
Exactly. We have to see the bigger picture.
So this deep dive, it's really just a starting point.
It is.
A way to equip you with some historical context. And different perspective.
To get you thinking.
On these complex issues.
To get you thinking critically.
Yeah, and hopefully to encourage you to keep learning and exploring.
To form your own informed opinion.
Because ultimately...
this isn't just about history.
Right.
It's about the present and the future.
It's about the world we're creating.
Exactly. It's about creating a society that truly lives up to its ideals.
Of equality and justice for all.
For all.
Well said. And if you want to dive deeper, we'll be sure to include links to King's book, Where Do We Go From Here?
Great book.
And other resources that explore these different perspectives on affirmative action.
Lots of good stuff out there.
You can find all of that in the episode description.
So be sure to check it out.
Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
It does.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you found it insightful.
And thought-provoking.
And maybe even a little bit challenging.
It's a complex topic.
It is.
But it's an important one.
It is. So remember. Keep questioning.
Keep learning.
And keep striving for a better world.
A more just and equitable world.
For everyone.
For everyone.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.